Hey Rebels, welcome to Blasphemous Nutrition. Consider this podcast your pantry full of clarity, perspective, and the nuance needed to counter the superficial health advice so freely given on the internet. I'm Aimee, the unapologetically candid host of Blasphemous Nutrition and a double-degreed nutritionist with 20 years experience. I'm here to share a more nuanced take on living and eating well to sustain and recover your health. If you found most health advice to be so generic as to be meaningless, or so extreme that it's unrealistic, and you don't mind the occasional F-bomb, you've come to the right place. From dissecting the latest nutrition trends to breaking down published research and sharing my own clinical experiences, I'm on a mission to foster clarity amidst all the confusion and empower you to have the health you need to live a life you love. Now let's get started. To celebrate National Walking Day in the United States, I've invited health coach Carolyn Cohen onto the show today to talk to us about the importance of movement and utilizing something that seems as simple as walking to make profound changes in your health. Carolyn graduated from Brown University and has an MBA from the Kellogg Graduate School of Management at Northwestern. After working 10 years in consumer packaged goods marketing, Carolyn faced a chronic health illness diagnosis and was able to heal from it. Realizing how much power we hold over our own health trajectory, she refocused on her career path and became a health coach back in 2009. Since that time, Carolyn Cohen has seen countless clients struggle with making behavior changes. They often believe they must shoot for the stars and abandon their life as they formerly knew it. So Carolyn helps them mine the health gold that is in the smaller, more doable changes. As a wellness guide, whether she's in your ears via her Wellness While Walking podcast or she's across the desk in a coaching session, Carolyn gently encourages and educates you, taking you from fine to fabulous. I'm pretty sure you'll enjoy our conversation today. I have absolutely loved getting to know Carolyn. She feels like a kindred spirit, and we had just a wonderful conversation, which I am thrilled to be able to share with you today. So if you have the opportunity, put on your shoes, step outside, and let this podcast fill your ears while you walk with Carolyn and I. Health coach Carolyn, welcome to Blasphemous Nutrition. I'm so excited to have you here.
I am so happy to be here, and I fancy myself a little bit of a rebel, so I think it's a natural fit.
You belong here, my dear.
That's awesome. Don't kick me out.
For those who don't listen to your podcast yet, why don't you share a little bit about yourself and how you came to be such an advocate for walking?
Awesome. Thank you for the opportunity. And I'm really, like I said, so happy to be here. My story is a little bit about rebellion in that I was raised by a health nut mom ahead of her time. Her goal was to keep my dad alive, and all the men in his family died early of heart disease. And so she was determined to keep him alive. And just spoiler alert, he is alive. But I was collateral damage in the effort, in that my childhood was very unlike a lot of the kids that I knew, almost everybody. And I wasn't really seeing that I was any better off for it than anybody else. And so I, as soon as I had any autonomy, I rebelled against that whole thing. And I'm like, it doesn't matter what we eat. It doesn't matter what we do. I'm good. Thanks, Mom. I appreciate it, but no, thank you. And that was all well and good until my early 30s. And I got a diagnosis of IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. So that was the first thing to go awry on my own health journey. And at that time, I was living in a suburb of Boston. I had a very demanding corporate kind of job downtown. I had a newborn child, and she went with me downtown where she went to daycare. And I was frazzled all the time because I just was working so much less than my job had demanded of me. And I was stressed. And then I felt like I wasn't doing a great job as a parent because I was away from her all day long and so on. And so I certainly wasn't taking care of myself at all. And I think IBS was not that common a diagnosis back then even. And miraculously, I found a doctor who didn't immediately put me on medication, but he's called my stress level kind of part of the equation, which is amazing. And so he suggested that I walk. And I did a little walking because I had to rush to get her to daycare, rush to pick her back up. But I wasn't really doing kind of any intentional movement. And I was doing a lot of sitting, obviously. I did start to walk, and we would try to get out after work, depending on the day, even once we got home, because usually then it was like dinner and so on. And then definitely over the weekends. And it was something I could take her on, and sometimes she'd sleep and sometimes not. But I just felt like I didn't feel guilty being away from her further. And I really did start to feel better. And it wasn't the only thing I did. I did change up some other habits, but I was like, wow, this wasn't really that bad. But I filed it away. I didn't change my whole approach to health or anything. And I was really determined once I had kids, and I ended up having 4 of them, that I just wasn't going to do what, had happened to me, which was I felt like a kind of an extreme upbringing. But then, like I said, they kept coming, those children, and they all had issues. Like, it was at the time, there was a book that came out that was like 4 A's, and I forget what they were, but it was like autism, allergies, ADHD, several things that had just become epidemic. Mm-hmm. And my kids had allergies and ADHD, and it was like one thing after another. It just felt like whack-a-mole. And then I really started to think that maybe my mom had been onto something. So there's only a couple of decades, so I still have hope with my own kids. But so I started to just do a boatload of reading and research and testing things out. And I have a picture of my second born. It's on my social media that like she's standing in front of a closet, like the pantry full of packaged goods that happens to be in extreme disarray. My kids look back and we had all that stuff because but I didn't go as wild. Like I still had, my tricks were many. I had many tricks up my sleeve, but I didn't deprive them. I just bored the heck out of them. So we only bought one kind of crap cookie. And then I was like, you know what? If you still want it, keep eating it. But I'm not going to give you 20 because I know what the power of variety is. And I want to use that on the veggies. Thank you very much. And offer you a bunch of veggies before dinner when you're getting crabby and some sort of dip, as opposed to having 20 different kinds of cookies because you'll never get bored. So I did. It wasn't as extreme as my own upbringing, but I did know that as the responsible adult, I had to do something to try to help them not have all these illnesses that they were facing. So that sort of just sums up. I found the power of walking. It was something I could continue to do. If I had a couple of kids in a stroller, we'd walk before we went to the bus stop or over to pick up the older kids at school, whatever. It just became a powerful part of my life, and getting away when I could on my own. I started to enjoy the suburban area I was living in terms of its beauty when my husband was home with the kids. And so it just became a big part of my life that I really appreciated. And at the same time, I started to become interested in becoming some sort of advocate for people taking kind of their power back as it relates to their health, because I think we're just totally not told how much power our lifestyle can have over our health and well-being, and we're not encouraged to pursue that. So that those two things happened in parallel.
Yeah, it's interesting. I do feel like there's a lot of talking past each other because it's common in the medical world. There's a story that people want the quick fix, people want the pill, and doctors don't have time to talk about lifestyle anyway. And a lot of them feel if I just say this person should just go for a walk, they're going to roll their eyes and keep doing what they're doing anyway. So I'm just going to save my breath and prescribe this laxative or this stool bulkener or whatever, and everybody's happy, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I don't think that's true. Certainly there are those people there, but I don't think that's true for most people. And I also think that a lot of patients don't have as much compassion for their physicians as perhaps is warranted because of the strain on the medical system and taxed as doctors are, and themselves quite unhealthy and feeling at a loss as to what to do because they're not well educated or empowered either to take power of their own health.
Right. And even if they do know, it's just the system's so not set up for them imparting that knowledge, like you said. So it's just, and many, I would say almost all of them get into the field because they want to help people heal. So I agree. Sometimes I know that sometimes I get mad at the system, but when I think of an individual physician, I'm not mad at them.
Exactly. No, actually, it's funny because I was having a conversation with a family member earlier today about some medical care that they've been receiving that I feel is subpar. And did not mince words about my opinion. Yeah, it's a very complex situation. And you're spot on. The system is really set up to perpetuate shareholder profits.
Yeah. Neither the physician nor the patient are really benefiting from this system, right?
Exactly.
Other powers that be.
Yeah. And I love it now that we are in a time in the world where we have access to information if we're curious to find answers on our own and to begin looking for alternatives to standard of care when standard of care isn't meeting our needs.
I agree. And we have to be careful. Yeah. But to have the option to find out, I know you must have encountered so many of these as well, but there's so many cases of people learning from others on something like a Facebook group that where there's no downside to trying it, or they run it past their physician and then try it, where they've found incredible success. So I think that it's not to be diminished in terms of the power that we have to actually do some reading and research. And then there's the coffee mug that says, "Don't confuse your Google search with my medical degree."
And that's a valid point as well.
Exactly. There are limits to both things. So.
Definitely. Yeah, keeping an open mind and remaining curious, I think, is important.
So important. And do you find the same? Like every now and then, I just get like a tap on the shoulder, like your mind isn't completely open. You know?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I totally have my biases. When I am aware of them, I do my best to always call them out because I think that's also something that we need to be more transparent about. This is my bias, and here it is. We all have them, right? We all have biases. We all have judgments. None of us are without them, but yet we try to hide them and pretend they're not there. And
yeah, that's the danger, right? I think it's really so great if we can model that there is uncertainty and there is bias, and we're going to do the best we can within those things, and certainly try to be curious and question and really look at all the sides if we can. But sometimes it's hard to catch ourselves.
It is. It's especially when I'm really attached to vegetables being the answer for everything.
I hear you. I love that.
So, Carolyn, tell me about walking was your gateway into this world and your children. What about that experience has really inspired you to do what you have been doing, to really reach out to others and to be an motivator, an instigator, if you will, for them to begin to take their own power back when it comes to their health?
Yeah, thank you. I think that really it comes down to the fact that what I did to change my health was just not that hard. And so it started to become obvious to me when I became a health coach and started to work with people, that there was a lot of feeling that everything had to be hard and had to be the most extreme. And oftentimes that was 180 degrees from where the person was themselves at that point. And I've seen it so many times, time and time again. And what happens often, not always, because there are cases where people make a very extreme change on a dime and it sticks. So I've seen that too. But too often I felt like what would happen was somebody would go from, let's say, sedentary and want to immediately go to what is at the other end of the spectrum, which is like a marathon run. It's not just a run. It's not just a 5K. We know couch to 5K, but like really training their eyes on something. And many people are able to do that. But sometimes what happens is whatever change they're trying to make is a little too extreme for it to become something that can be a habit. Now, that can be for a lot of reasons. A lot of people, I think, probably underestimate the time and haven't cleared out time cleared out resources for whatever change they're going to make. Sometimes there might be an injury. Sometimes they might not find the joy in it that kind of helps sustain it as something that we turn to all the time. But what I would see a lot of was people who would try something for whatever reason, read about it in a magazine, heard about it from a neighbor, just decided that was the way to go. And then not just revert back to like a lesser step, but go back to where they were and sometimes really gave up on the whole endeavor. And so what I felt like walking to me when I first did it, when I had IBS, when I first really did it very intentionally, showed me that it just doesn't have to be all or nothing. And I think that ends up being, fast forward now 27 years, all or nothing thinking is really a pitfall in so many ways. Yeah. So I see it play out in so many different ways. That same thing where it's like from where we are to a very far away extreme, and there's no, benefit of anything in between. And so walking to me just is, it can be hard for people. There are people I've worked with who really have a hard time getting to the end of the driveway and back. It's just been a very long time. There might be certain physical conditions happening and so on. So it's not always, it can be very challenging. But I think there's other people for whom it feels just so easy that it can't be beneficial. And so if you extrapolate that to health, right, other health realms, not just movement, let's say you're getting most of your meals on the go and you decide that on Sundays you're going to cook your meals at home. That's so incredibly powerful. You start to change your taste buds. You start to think that it's not so hard. I just do it one day a week. You get the benefits and it's maybe fun. Maybe you find some joy in it that you didn't expect, or find some sort of connection to someone else while you're doing it, or some connection to something that you used to eat when you were a child. Whatever it is, all those little changes can be so beneficial. And what sometimes bothers me about the health world is like that people like feel like they have to, that the fitness industry or whatever, like ratchets things up. Go like walking's great, but
now let's rock.
We might give power walking in between. But like it's always just let's ratchet it up. Like there was an exercise physiologist whose work I admire. But she would say, okay, when you feel like you've mastered gentle yoga, you can go to power yoga. So what if I just want to do gentle yoga? You know what I mean? What if that is really great for me? So I think that's just the beauty, is that there's so many ways to do this, and to engage in black and white thinking where you define somehow, or somebody does it for you, that there's one way. I think that's the biggest pitfall. And that's why walking is so wonderful, because you really can, like, you can just, with air quotes, walk and have so many impacts on your health and well-being.
It is really profoundly impactful. And I think we do have that tendency to minimize it because most of us are in a place where we can take it for granted. And so it doesn't, air quotes, doesn't count. And as you were talking, I was thinking of the culture that we grew up in, no pain, no gain, James.
Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm.
And that era was also, you can't ever be too rich or too thin. And I feel like America has done an excellent job at really testing that theory out and finding out, no, wait, actually.
So true.
Man.
Yes.
We can be too rich. We can be too thin.
You're so right.
Oh, because that doesn't actually work out.
No, it doesn't. You're so right. I love that take.
Yeah. And I really appreciate too the nod you gave to joy and the importance of enjoying the movement that you're doing. Because if you don't enjoy what you're doing, you are not likely to keep up. You're just not likely to keep up with it. Like we all have, as adults, we all have so many things we don't enjoy doing. When you're taking the time to do something for your health, if you can enjoy it, that's more motivation to keep doing it.
Yes, it really does help. And so there's so many options in so many of these steps that would make a difference on our health trajectory. So keep looking for the thing that brings you that joy, because it will stick around that much more.
I'm thinking of my husband as a young man who he didn't find a type of movement that he really enjoyed until adulthood. So what would you say to his adolescent self or someone who yet hasn't found movement that they like? Don't like walking is boring. They are just more cozy on the couch. They don't like the smell of the pool. They are certainly not going to get in a gym and lift heavy things with grunting, sweaty guys. What do you say to people who are really struggling to find movement that works for them?
Part of me usually does work with clients to think about what they actually did as a kid. So now you're really stumping me with not liking anything. But maybe there was something if you really thought about it that did bring him joy that involved being up and out, playing on the jungle gym or playing some sort of chase game with kids or whatever. But if really not, I would still urge people to just almost make a list of possible things. I've had people who swore that they didn't like exercise find a sport that they liked. Especially it's helpful if you're getting in on something like pickleball, which I think like nobody really was playing. There certainly were the tennis players and other people who had a little head start. But I feel like there's always something that you can find that involves movement. It could be literally volunteering at your local library if you're a bookworm and volunteering to reshelve books. Like that is movement, really defining it broadly. We have a farm in our town. There are people there who have told me that they don't do much else. So like they can come home super sore from the first time in the season where they're like lofting hay up into a high spot. It's not muscles that I necessarily use either all the time. So I would be sore too, but that they appreciate being out, being in community. There are a lot of baby animals around and little kids come through and get the animals. And like, it's fun to be in this little microcosm where you're known and you're contributing and you're part of the fabric and you get to be outside and so on. So it's really defining it so incredibly broadly that you think about something where you have a value or an interest that aligns. It might be in a church, for example. Is there a way to be active in a church and instead of sitting, be the server, be the person who helps the elderly go through the buffet, like whatever it is, to just add a little bit of moving around. Because I think that once you do, you find it makes you feel good. Like somebody once said to me, "Do you like to pop up from the couch when we're all together?" Yeah, I just feel like I know I'll feel better if I actually get up, even though we're all hanging around and chatting and whatever. There's something about me that knows that I will feel better when I pop up and get somebody something. And then I might return to being seated. But I do think that once we have that little bit of movement, we start to realize that does feel really good. We were meant to move. And I think that if we can get past all of the things our society does to keep us inactive, that we will feel better. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We do spend so much of our time sitting between the car and the desk, and
it's really hard to fight against that. It really is. But even the smallest bit of getting up has been shown to help, like even a few minutes. And I think like sometimes if we're working and we're engrossed in what we're doing, maybe we're in the zone or we're feeling flow or we're hyper focusing, depends on what you call it. But it can be really hard to make ourselves get up. And in some ways, it's good to keep working on what you're working because there are those, if you're studying, for example, there's switching costs. Like I always tell my kids, like every time you look at your phone while you're studying, it takes you a period of time to come back and get engrossed again. But I do think that there has to be a balance, because if we could sit and get engrossed in our work for hours on end, we're really not getting up and moving our bodies and all the things that come from that, which we don't even think about. It's not just, I don't know, sometimes people think in terms of calories or whatever. Yes. But it's, like the lubrication of our joints and the movement of our lymphatic system, which requires movement. And, so many benefits, the brain benefits, the getting oxygenated blood to our brains will help us do that work better once we sit back down. So it's just, there are so many ways that we, move less than our bodies were designed to, but then it's really not that onerous to get up a couple of times in the course of an hour. And even to like buck the system in terms of like rebelling
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, I know you're all seated around this conference room table, but I'm going to stand over here. And I used to say, oh, I have a bad back and I can't sit for too long. Now I just own it. I can't sit that long. I just can't. And so I'll stand up. And like one of our mutual mentors used to say, fit out. And I'm like, I am going to fit out. Yeah.
I love
I'm going
it.
to stand up over here.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. I love that idea of just being standing instead of sitting at the conference table for a meeting, right? Or instead of sitting at your desk during a Zoom call, stand instead.
Yes.
And one thing I've noticed for myself, if I have been at the desk for too long and I feel my focus is fading or I start to feel tired, that's my body telling me, you have been sitting too long, get up and move. And simply like stepping outside, walking down to the end of the street and back, and then coming in, I feel refreshed, I feel revitalized, and I can then sometimes begrudgingly sit back down and get to work.
Yeah.
But
the awareness is key. Just being aware and saying like to yourself, oh, I feel worse. I don't feel super accomplished. I'm feeling like I'm lagging. I'm not being as productive as I might be and so on. And then appreciating how you feel after you come back. Like that's all part of making it into something that you would do more regularly.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's also too a time when people often take a break and they'll get something to eat and pick their energy up. When they stepped outside and took a fitness break, a fitness snack.
Yep.
And that they would feel just as energized, if not more so, and revitalized.
Right. And even the health benefits of walking, we see in the headlines, or at least you and I probably do, because that's what we're looking at, that X thousand steps can help you realize this benefit, or Y thousand steps can help you realize that benefit. The amount of walking that needs to be done to realize health benefits is really not immense. And I think you have to just know yourself. And if you're motivated by a certain number of steps, then great, go for it. But you don't have to. Like in my mind, I like to think, did I walk today? Like that is just like a yes or no binary question, right? Did I get a walk in? Yeah. And like, I don't perseverate over steps. I think that for some people that's motivating and other people it's less helpful, and maybe amount of time, or do they walk after a couple of meals? Walking after meals is incredibly powerful, and the research is just mounting there that in terms of blood sugar regulation, one of the best things we can do is do the old Italian passeggiata, like the walk after meal. And I don't feel like in my mind when I've been in Italy that people are walking super fast. They're sauntering. They're using the large muscles of their bodies while they walk. And that is calling up those cells are calling up for sugar to come out of the bloodstream and into the muscles where they can be burned for fuel. And the impact on our blood sugar is tremendous by a 10-minute walk after a meal. So like maybe if people are tracking something, maybe it's not necessarily number of steps, but it's did I walk after lunch and dinner? A few minutes.
It is really profoundly impact. And yeah, it's not, they don't speed walk in Europe.
Oh.
They meander. They stroll.
And they stroll. Yes. I love that. Mosey, saunter. I love all those things.
Yes. Yeah. It's usually because oftentimes too, there are children in tow, and children are not in a linear direction for a long time at a high speed. They're all over the place.
Exactly. I guess just the message that I love about walking as a metaphor is like it can be fun, it can be varied, it doesn't have to feel extreme, and it doesn't have to be something like out of the realm of what we do already. I love that's at our fingertips, and I feel like that's such a wonderful message. And as National Walking Day in the US, maybe it's North America actually, is Wednesday, April 3rd this year. And I love that walking's being celebrated. And I do think that is happening. The research is out. On TikTok, there are all kinds of fads about walking, but many of them involve young people, and professional athletes have incorporated walking into their routines. I feel like it's just coming into its own with all the research and everything. And I think people got a little taste of it during the pandemic. Back in March of 2020 was when a lot of the US started to stay closer to home. And I think people realized the power then of walking in many ways. So I do feel like we're been back into the glory days of appreciating it. And I'm grateful for that.
It's timely for you.
It is. It's good. It's a good thing. I think it's really wonderful that no pain, no gain has slipped a little bit as the only path. If that works for you, great. If you want to find another way to improve your health such that our health span and our lifespan are on the same plane, I think that walking is incredibly powerful.
Beautiful. If you could offer a very concise piece of advice for my listeners who want to begin, but they're in that place that you were 27 years ago, where they feel overworked, underslept, stressed out, and they don't know how they can fit something like this in, what would you tell them?
I know it sounds ridiculous, but can you give yourself 5 minutes a day? Can you intentionally move your body in whatever way? It doesn't have to be walking, dance, stretch for 5 minutes a day. And just make that a goal and appreciate yourself when you can do it, and be kind to yourself when it doesn't work out. But I think that is the smallest step that you can take is going to be by far the most powerful.
I love it. I love it. Is there a question that I haven't asked you in our time together that you wish I had asked you?
Oh, that's such a good question. We were talking a little bit about productivity and getting our work done and so on. And just one of the lovely things about walking in particular, since we're celebrating it today, is that we can multitask. So like walking can be used to check off other boxes and not simply walking. We can connect with people. In fact, walking with people is lovely, but walking in a place where you're like coming kind of face to face with others as you pass, those micro moments of connection have been shown to increase our health and being, our mental outlook significantly. If you can catch somebody's eye, maybe smile just a little bit, that has huge power. So using walking just to encounter people, looking for something to be in awe of has been shown to be another really powerful feeling, that we see ourselves as part of something bigger and we appreciate the world around us. And I live in a city right now, and I'm like walking under oftentimes an underpass of a highway. And I still can find things to be in awe of, even though the setting itself isn't what you'd consider to be beautiful. So I feel like there's so many ways to use walking. It can be done in a multitude of ways, like really has been shown to foster our creativity. So you're probably carrying your phone. What if you just said, I'm going to take one picture on every walk? It's just like fun to express yourself in that way and to remember and you start to see more things because you're looking for that opportunity. So there's just so many ways to use walking, and it's not that easy to multitask in this world and be able to do two things at once. And of course we have to be careful and mindful of our surroundings, but walking is one of those just sort of incredible opportunities to pair something else along with it.
I love that. Yeah, during the pandemic, when I was out walking to prevent going stir crazy and starting to run again, it was really nice to see the changes in the neighborhood. And I do love that National Walking Day is happening in the springtime, because that is really when you can step outside. And if you live in a neighborhood that has yards or that has gardens, you can watch sometimes day by day the changes in the landscape, and you're more likely to meet your neighbors because they're out puttering in the garden. And it's a really wonderful time to be outside.
Yes, I agree with you.
And when you stay at it, you see your neighborhood in all of the seasons. And then you start to notice, oh, that bird lives in that tree. Oh, that squirrel is always chattering at me when I walk by. Oh, and your animal neighbor.
True. Too. I know. It is. And even the light will be so different from day to day. I walked the same loop many hundreds of times because of where I used to live. But if you really notice, like things were different every single time.
Yeah. It's a wonderful exercise in mindfulness if you let it.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And you can absolutely use walking to build that, also build the skill of being present It's really one of the best ways to pay attention to your senses and what's going on around you right then and there, being in the moment.
Carolyn, I know how to find you when I want to listen to you. Why don't you tell our listeners where they can find you if they want to hear more from you?
Oh, that's so generous. Thank you. So the show is called Wellness While Walking, and it can be found, I think, everywhere where you would possibly get your podcasts from, but also at wellnesswhilewalking.com. And I would be honored. Please let me know if you listen. And if you came from the Blasphemous Nutrition podcast, I'd love to connect with you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for spending some time with me to celebrate walking today.
Been so fun. Thank you so much for having me, Aimee.
My pleasure.
Any and all information shared here is for educational and entertainment purposes only and is not to be misconstrued as offering medical advice. Listening to this podcast does not constitute a provider-client relationship. Note, I'm not a doctor nor a nurse, and it is imperative that you utilize your brain and your medical team to make the best decisions for your own health. The use of information on this podcast or materials linked to this podcast are at the user's own risk. No information nor resources provided are intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Be a smart human and do not disregard or postpone obtaining medical advice for any medical condition you may have. Seek the assistance of your healthcare team for any such conditions and always do so before making any changes to your medical, nutrition, or health plan. If you have found some nuggets of wisdom, make sure to subscribe, rate, and share Blasphemous Nutrition with those you care about. As you navigate the labyrinth of health advice out there, remember, health is a journey, not a dietary dictatorship. Stay skeptical, stay daring, and challenge the norms that no longer serve you. If you've got burning questions or want to share your own flavor of rebellion, slide into my DMs. Your stories fuel me, and I love hearing them. Thanks again for tuning into Blasphemous Nutrition. Until next time, this is Aimee signing off, reminding you that truth is nuanced, and any dish can be made better with a little bit of sass.